Alrighty, we are back, and today guys I wanted to change up the format and offer you a more off-the-cuff, natural response in regards to how I feel about the current state of Undisputed. This is a small channel, so I can be a little bit more free in what I have to say. So with that, topics of discussion today include number one, what I think Steel City Interactive have planned for the next 6 to 9 months before console release. Number two, pinpointing the fundamental issues in the game from a subjective standpoint, the things that really irritate me. I can explain a little bit more in depth why they are an issue. And number three, a theory that I have, which isn't a good one, being that I think Undisputed will find success on console release even in a mediocre state. And why is that a bad thing? Well, if the game finds success, then what reason is there to fix what isn't broken? And companies and stakeholders define what works based on statistics and numbers. If the game sells, they will not invest resources to fix the issues of which we've been discussing for the past couple of years. So let's start with what I believe to be the direction that Steel City will take before releasing to console. And these are all assumptions of which I've reached based on my own experience working in startups as someone who is hands-on, but also as someone who has managed teams, or better still, understands the pressures of being part of a startup where you not only have to meet the expectations of the user, you have to meet expectations of shareholders. So Steel City, they just finally released the career mode and character creator mode, and my overall sort of opinion on it is that the character creator mode is really good. It's an in-depth, nuanced system which essentially allows you to create a reasonable silhouette of popular fighters of which Steel City currently don't have license to. Now I say silhouette because I think the base models look slightly cartoonish. I could be wrong, but I don't think that base model is a scanned person. Let me know in the comment sections if I'm wrong there. So with that, any character that we create tends to look slightly off, specifically in the eyes and the mouth area. Although that's just me. I am a designer by trade, and I have modeled numerous characters using 3D software, but maybe you've modeled something better than me. Let me know in the comments if you've created something that looks as realistic as the real roster counterparts. Now the character creation mode as a standalone feature with no doubt will draw a lot of eyes to the game, especially when they eventually make it available for online play. However, all in all, it's just bells and whistles, especially when we compare it to the career mode, which has been in development for, let's just say, over a year. Steel City placed a lot of stock in this career mode. We as the Undisputed community, if you follow the roundtables, often when core gameplay issues have been mentioned, career mode is always brought up as the main priority. For example, if there were gameplay mechanics online that we wished or wanted them to focus on, we would be informed that those gameplay mechanics tied into the AI that they were developing, and the AI of course ties into the career mode. So anything related to AI was essentially career mode progress as well. So let me just quickly recap. The character creation mode is great, but sadly the career mode, in my opinion, is mediocre. Now if you want more insight on this, make sure to check out my in-depth deep dive review of the career mode, which I just released a couple of hours ago on my main channel, Claimer Uncut. Now, I'm not under the impression that the Steel City heads such as Ash Habib assumed that the career mode will save the day. I more so think from their perspective, it was a necessity that they have a career mode complete for launch, and that makes complete sense. None of us outside of the Steel City team understand in full their finances or where they invest their resources. So if we were to give them benefit of doubt, we'd say that they focused their resources on the career mode, and that even includes their 3D artists, who I forgot to mention in my main video, created a fantastic stage set in a bar to hold amateur fights in. So with that being said, the career mode is now complete, and despite the odd refinements, which I'm sure they're going to focus on in the next coming weeks, I'd imagine they have resources free to at least attempt some of the main core issues that we have spoken about over the past year. The reason why I say this is because I think they have attempted to fix things. However, they're always juggling that that with attempting to meet a deadline for the career. And when you think about it from that standpoint, the radio silence, it all makes sense because it's energy wasted listening to people complain, including myself, when we don't fully understand what resources they have available. And I know we all assume they have loads of resources, but let's give them benefit of doubt that if they have completed the career mode, that they potentially have resource free at this stage to address core issues. And that's what I think will be their focus during the next 6 months. And honestly, I don't think they're going to be making any huge announcements in regards to those updates. I just think within the next 6 months, they'll just release them, hopefully with no major promotions attached. Now, of course, I could be wrong. So let me offer an alternative perspective, which I think a lot of us share, which is that, to be frank, the Steel City team simply do not have the capabilities to refine aspects of the core mechanics of the game. That is always a likelihood. For those that do not know, the game was developed in Unity Engine. And since development at its core is solving problems, and often we rely on communities to help us with those problems, the Unity Engine community is a lot smaller than, let's just say, the Unreal Engine community. So unless they've hired Unity Engine developers specifically, then they essentially have developers who are trying to learn the system on the fly. So what does that mean? Well, it means the opposite direction Steel City might take from having the resource to fix key aspects of the game within the next 6 months. They may instead focus on sales and promotion. So if we consider what that looks like, we know already they're working with Saudi. They have some sort of Saudi deal, and they are likely to use Undisputed now that the price has gone up, now that they have a career mode, to promote big fights coming up. They might use these 6 months to test the waters with fighter DLC. For example, I could imagine them releasing Francis Ngannou as paid DLC. And going forward, Undisputed will just be a funnel for promotions, paid DLC, sponsorships, promoting big new boxing events, or even new talent. Now remember that thought, because I'm going to touch upon this, or at least why I think this is a huge issue in my third point. Let me just first offer you my thoughts now on the key broken mechanics, which I personally would like to see them fix. Of course, there's a plethora of broken mechanics in the game, but there's only so much they can fix in a short amount of time, and making the assumption they don't actually have the know-how to fix a lot of these problems. So as an avid online player, I want to touch on some of the key things that I feel need to be focused on within the next 6 months. Number one, if this Saudi investment is legit, although they are moving to console, so perhaps they'll never focus on this, but I would love to see them finally implement an anti-cheat system. They are clearly having issues implementing the free anti-cheat system available from Steam. If they can implement something off the shelf, which is easier to include but is slightly costly, this in turn could solve so many issues that we deal with online. One of the main issues being that we can't differentiate from what is cheating and what is simply broken in the game. Number two, and an issue which will affect console players as well, is that I would love for the team to evaluate the latest key exploits which are being utilized online and focus within a 4-week period, removing as many of those exploits as possible. Some examples would be the diagonal dodge, which does not have a stamina deterrent. I bring this up because I think it's low effort to fix. You simply add a stamina deterrent. The same applies to sidestepping in general. It's becoming a new trend for Twitch players who do anything to win, who have found the exploit in sidestepping non-stop, because the very small stamina deterrent is worth constantly sidestepping to duplicate their power. Number two, I would like to see them include a stamina deterrent across the board on power punches. Note I keep on mentioning stamina deterrent. The reason being is because these are low effort fixes. There are all sorts of ways to refine and improve things. You can change the animations, for example, for power punches. But an easier fix is that if someone throws a power straight with the same hand multiple times, reduce their stamina so they cannot throw it multiple times. In terms of long-term stamina, if you throw a power straight or say a power hook 10 to 15 times in a round, let that simply affect your long-term stamina. It's not rocket science. Number three, an effective jab. The only jab of which is effective is holding the joystick back and throwing the jab, because that jab is not telegraphed, it's relatively fast, and it works well as a body jab as well. Outside of that, doing a push jab or a sidestep jab, in short, is not very effective, and it was far more effective in the earlier iterations. What do I mean by effective? Well, when my opponent is pushing forward, running into my jab, I want my opponent to second guess themselves. I want them to feel a sense of fear that they can hurt themselves running into my jab. Currently, if I throw a jab, there are certain opponents who use overpowered fighters who simply walk right through it and throw power shots over and over again. The most common scenario is that your opponent will let you throw first for them to throw second. There's no timing or skill involved in this. They simply wait for you to throw first and then they counter. They don't dodge counter, they just counter whilst getting hit. This is a huge issue in the game, especially in ranked play and amongst fighters or players who believe they are elite players. Most of them, let's face it, are not. Number 4, bring back fast hooks. At the moment, the only way to perform an effective hook is to use certain OP fighters, Muhammad Ali being one of the main ones, as well as Joe Frazier. But all in all, hooks for your average fighter are extremely slow, and if they're slow, there's no point throwing them. I don't know about you guys, but I often find my favorite weapons, which I can no longer use effectively, I just don't use them at all, which in turn makes my playstyle focused on using jabs and straights, as well as uppercuts, purely on the fact that they're not slow. For example, in earlier iterations, you would throw body hooks because they moved at a reasonable speed, but since now they're so slow and there is this huge wind up, there's no point throwing them. So it's very rare you see them in use online, and most people just resort to using uppercuts. This actually sums up the issues across the board, and I'll summarize it like this. If punches have been nerfed to the extent that they move at a snail pace, specifically fundamental punches, fundamental boxing mechanics, right? Why would anyone use those punches if they can use something alternatively which is fast and efficient and has no stamina deterrence? This is the mindset of which the gameplay director and the development team need to have when fixing issues in the game. Asking questions. Why would players use a stationary hook which is slow and ineffective when they can instead push the joystick up to throw a faster hook which makes it look like you're fighting Drunken Master? It's unrealistic, but yet it's effective, so players will use it. These are the puzzles that the team need to solve before release if their motives are to truly create the most realistic boxing simulation on the market. Number 4 or number 5 has to be overall movement. It's far too easy to get out of range. Of course, when moving backwards, we should all have the capabilities to have spurts to move at full speed. But all in all, you should not be able to move backwards consistently at the same speed your opponent is able to move forward. As I said, that would occur in spurts. It's more likely that you would become off balance, constantly moving backwards, not being aware of how close you are to the ring, for example. You'd be wary of your surroundings, therefore you would move slightly slower. In addition, moving backwards should offer some level of stamina deterrence. If you don't believe me, try it in real life. If you're not trained to run backwards, you're utilizing different muscles. It's taxing on your stamina. Whatever the solution of choice, Steel City need to find a solution to the opponents who refuse to fight in the pocket, and when they're in danger, they run around the ring until they regain some level of stamina, and often as a result, you end up chasing them and walking into a power cross, for example, or a power body uppercut, which is often the case when you're going up against, let's say, a Tyson Fury. Number 6, I don't think I've mentioned it already, but same arm punches. You gain power through momentum and the trajectory of which a punch is thrown. If you're throwing a left hook multiple times, even if you're Roy Jones Jr., it's more than likely that the follow-up hooks are not as powerful as the first hook, where you were able to build some level of momentum, whether that be through your foot movement, your hips, your glutes. By the third or fourth left hook, you're generating most of your power from your shoulder. currently in the game, you'll find the following combinations. If you're the likes of Joe Frazier or Muhammad Ali, it would simply be a repetition of hooks. But you might also notice quite a few people who will throw a jab, hook, or jab, uppercut combination, all with the same hand. And it becomes their go-to throughout the fight. It's a huge exploit because they're able to generate the same amount of power where you often find yourself getting rocked by the third or fourth punch to where it just doesn't make any sense. And that leads me to my final issue, at least for this video, that I would like to see them fix. Of course, let me know in the comments section what you'd like to see fixed. I'm sure I'm missing something really obvious. But on the note of punching with the same hand, number 6, if someone is punching in slow motion and they land, that punch should not even have the ability to move you, let alone daze you. And this is actually one of the most common issues in the game. It tricks you into thinking you're safe. Now, the biggest exploit that I've seen with this, and I'm going to bring up a guy actually who does this a lot. It's not just him, but there's a guy called Wrong Side OTT, and he will use diagonal dodges, side steps, etc. over and over again to the extent that he gets tired fast. And once he's tired, then his player starts moving in slow motion, but he continues to sidestep and diagonal dodge, and everything he does at this point is slow motion. But the minute he touches you, it's just as impactful as if he were moving at normal speed, and it's incredibly hard to deal with. It's a huge exploit. These are things that need to be fixed, not just for PC but also for console. The reason, of course, why all these things need to get fixed is because they're about to enter a new demographic of casual players on console, and if they think our feedback is bad, just look at UFC 5 as a baseline. It's going to get much worse. But that leads me to my final theory of what I believe is going to happen to the game, because you can actually use UFC, or at least EA UFC, as a baseline. We're already starting to see it happen, in fact, with the Undisputed community. I know a lot of people take offense when I mention degeneracy and idiocracy, but the reality is, the degenerates in this world make it a lot harder for those with any shred of integrity trying to do the right thing. And what we're finding with the release of the character creation mode is content creators who have been on the negative bandwagon for Undisputed for a very long time now, all of a sudden flipping the switch and using the character creation as an opportunity to further their own channels. They create a character which is popular, and then they live in fantasy land pretending they're having a great time moving this character up the ranks. And of course, they gain views, because who would not want to see Mike Tyson or Errol Spence or Floyd Mayweather available in the game in some form? Now, I'm going somewhere with this, but let me just elaborate a little bit. So these content creators, they essentially make pennies from these videos, but in the long run, they're offering free promotion for Undisputed, which is fine when you're honest in your playthroughs. But a lot of these guys who, as I said, not only complain about the game, but offer very little constructive criticism and just make their stamp on the web to essentially say the game is simply bad, they are all of a sudden creating characters and, for views, creating the illusion that they're having a fantastic time. So how does this tie into my main point? I believe Undisputed will release on console in pretty much the same state it's in now. And when you have the likes of Martial Mind with over 500,000 subs, who has just recently played probably more than 10 hours on the career mode, despite clearly stating he was bored of the game a few months ago, we have a plethora of mini Martial Minds doing the same in an attempt to crack the algorithm just like Martial Mind. Is it going to happen? No, because most of them are void of personality, or they're simply degenerates. But in turn, they will push sales, off the cuff sales, meaning someone will see them play as Mike Tyson and they'll think, hey, I wouldn't mind playing as Mike Tyson. You know what? Let me just put my hard-earned money down without much thought. And then 2 hours later, they realize it was a waste of money, but they move on. That is a win-win for Steel City Interactive. Free promotion from content creators pretending they're having a fantastic time, off-the-cuff purchases, and when the shareholders look at the overall numbers, they see the game as a success, and therefore there's no real reason to invest resources in fixing the issues that we have spoken about for over a year. Add on to that the fact that they're going to have paid DLC, that with every boxing match that is scheduled, you will have the mini Marshall Minds creating characters a few days before the match and creating quote unquote simulations of that match, pretending to have a fabulous time. That in turn creates more sales. And as I said, Steel City will have no reason to invest in resources to fix the game because the numbers alone will suggest that it's a success. EA UFC is the blueprint for this. It's sad. It really is sad, but there really is nothing we can do about it. Now, again, I would urge you, if you're interested in my opinion of the current career mode, check out my video on my main channel because I also mention a solution for those degenerate content creators, being that they can still promote the game whilst being honest to their audience. Transparency fixes everything. Look at all my playthroughs. I'm always transparent, whether it be in my titles, whether it be in the video itself. I make it clear I am dealing with exploits, cheaters, online issues, and bad mechanics, but I make it entertaining. Am I perfect? No. I also enjoy the game. I rely on the fundamental mechanics that work, so there will be the odd video where I'm simply demonstrating my skill. But all in all, the theme of my channel, both of my channels, is that this game is severely broken, and if we don't fix it, Steel City Interactive will end up holding the monopoly on boxing games, and that includes boxing licenses, and we will end up in the same loophole as UFC, having our favorite franchises under the control of money-hungry, soulless psychopaths who view us as cockroaches. And that includes the degenerate content creators who, as I said, make pennies from these videos, but in turn make these people rich. Anywho, this was an off-the-cuff video. Let me know what you think. Should I stick with this format going forward? See it more as something just to have on in the background. But either way, listen, I appreciate this community. There are a lot of good people who simply want a casual game to play after a hard day at work or looking after their family, where they can simulate the sport that they grew up loving. I do what I can to represent you. So before you forget, please like the video. It helps with the algorithms. And let's just hope for the best that within the next 6 months, Steel City will have the resource to fix many of the issues we discussed over the past year, now that the career mode is essentially complete. Have a great weekend, guys. Take care. Peace.